The metal corridors of Nexus 7 hummed with a constant low vibration. Daewon Kim walked his usual patrol route, his boots making soft thuds against the floor. He had been doing this job for 3 years now, and he knew every corner of this section. The diplomatic station floated in space between Earth territory and the Valkyrian Empire. It was supposed to be neutral ground, a place where humans and aliens could meet and talk without starting wars. Daewon was a Marine, but his job here was boring most days. He checked doors, watched monitors, and made sure nobody caused trouble. He was 28 years old and had joined the military because his father and grandfather had done the same. Fighting was in his blood, but there was no fighting here, just walking and watching. Today was different. Today an alien princess was arriving. Daewon had seen the briefing files. Princess Yura of House Velkaris was coming to stay for 6 months, as part of some cultural exchange program. The Valkyrians were an advanced alien race. They looked almost human, but had strange crystal growths on their skin that glowed faintly. They could read minds and talk to each other without speaking. They thought they were better than humans. Daewon stood in the main docking bay with 20 other security personnel. They wore their dress uniforms because this was an important event. Diplomats and officials crowded the bay, all wanting to see the alien princess. Daewon stood at the back observing. He preferred to watch rather than be in the center of attention. The Valkyrian ship arrived silently. It looked like a giant crystal, catching the light from the station and breaking it into rainbows. The docking port connected with a hiss and the airlock doors opened. A group of tall aliens walked out. They moved gracefully, their crystalline skin shimmering under the lights. In the center walked Princess Yura. She was beautiful in an alien way. Her skin had a slight blue tint, and small crystals grew along her cheekbones and forehead like delicate jewelry. Her eyes were large and completely black, no white visible at all. She wore flowing robes that seemed to move even when she stood still. Her face showed no emotion. The Valkyrians prided themselves on controlling their feelings. The Earth ambassador stepped forward and gave a formal greeting. Princess Yura responded through a translator device, her own language sounding like musical chimes. Daewon watched from his position. Something felt wrong. He could not explain it, but his instincts were telling him to pay attention. Years of military training had taught him to trust those instincts. The delegation moved through the station toward the diplomatic quarters. Daewon was not assigned to follow them, but he noticed something odd. The environmental system display showed a fluctuation in one of the corridors they would pass through. It was small, barely noticeable, but it should not be there at all. He tapped his communicator. His commanding officer, Colonel Hana Park, answered immediately. Daewon explained what he had seen. Colonel Park told him to check it out, but to be careful. This was a diplomatic event, and they could not afford mistakes. Daewon took a service corridor that ran parallel to the main hallway. He moved quickly but quietly, his hand resting on his weapon. The environmental anomaly was in Section 7B, a junction where several corridors met. When he arrived, he saw nothing unusual at first. Then he noticed a maintenance panel that was slightly open. Someone had been here recently. He opened the panel fully and looked inside. His blood went cold. There was a device attached to the power conduit, something that definitely should not be there. It had alien writing on it, Valkyrian symbols. Before he could call it in, he heard voices approaching. The princess and her escort were coming down the main corridor. Daewon made a split-second decision. He stepped into the main corridor, just as the group came around the corner. Princess Yura was in the center, surrounded by her guards and human diplomats. Daewon saw one of the Valkyrian guards reach for something under his robe. The guard's face showed emotion for the first time, a twisted look of hate. Everything happened in seconds. The guard pulled out a weapon, a small crystalline device that began to glow with deadly energy. Daewon did not think. He ran forward and threw himself in front of Princess Yura just as the weapon fired. The energy blast hit him square in the chest. Pain exploded through his body. It felt like being hit by lightning and burned by fire at the same time. His neural implants, the small computer chips in his brain that all soldiers had, sparked and died. He could smell his own flesh burning. He fell to the floor, unable to move or breathe properly. Through blurry vision, he saw chaos erupt. Other security personnel tackled the assassin. Alarms blared throughout the station. People were shouting. But all Daewon could focus on was the pain and the strange sensation of his implants failing. Those implants had been part of him for 10 years, Now they were dead and part of his mind felt empty. Then Princess Yura was kneeling beside him. Her face was close to his, and for the first time he saw emotion there. Shock, confusion, something else he could not name. She placed her hands on his chest right where the blast had hit. Her crystals began to glow brighter, pulsing with light. Energy flowed from her into him. It felt strange, not painful but not comfortable either. It was like cold water and warm sunlight at the same time. His body started to respond. His lungs began working again. The worst of the pain faded to a dull ache. But something else happened too. He felt her presence in his mind, not reading his thoughts, but there nonetheless. A connection formed between them, invisible but real. Medical personnel arrived and took over. They loaded Daewon onto a stretcher and rushed him to the medical bay. He drifted in and out of consciousness during the trip. Every time he woke, he could still feel that strange connection to the princess. He could sense her emotions, fear and confusion mixing together. It was overwhelming. He spent 3 days in medical care. The doctors told him he was lucky to be alive. The energy weapon had burned through his uniform and scorched his chest and arms. His neural implants were completely destroyed and could not be replaced immediately. He would need surgery later, but for now he had to manage without them. It felt like being partially blind and deaf. The implants had given him access to data, communications, and enhanced senses. Without them, he was just a regular human again. The connection to Princess Yura remained. He could feel her even from different parts of the station. Her emotions came through like distant music. He learned that she was asking about him, wanting to know if he would survive. The Valkyrian delegation was in chaos. The assassin had been part of a radical group that opposed any contact with humans. They saw the cultural exchange as a betrayal of Valkyrian purity. On the 4th day, Colonel Park visited him in the medical bay. She sat beside his bed and looked at him with a mixture of pride and concern. She told him that he had done well, that he had saved the princess and prevented a diplomatic disaster. Then she told him something unexpected. Princess Yura had made a formal request. She wanted Daewon assigned as her personal guard for the rest of her stay on Nexus 7. It was unusual, unprecedented even. Valkyrians did not normally request specific humans for anything, but the princess had been very clear. She wanted the soldier who had protected her. She wanted Daewon. Colonel Park asked him if he was willing to take the assignment. It would mean long hours standing guard, attending diplomatic functions, and being constantly close to alien royalty. It would be different from his normal patrol work. Daewon thought about it for only a moment before agreeing. Something about this felt right even though he could not explain why. Maybe it was the connection they now shared. Maybe it was curiosity about the princess who had saved his life after he saved hers. Or maybe it was just duty. Either way, his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. He would stand watch for an alien princess, not knowing that one day she would become a queen, and that queen would refuse to ever let him go. Daewon stood outside Princess Yura's quarters at attention. His new position had started a week ago, and he was still getting used to it. The door behind him was elegant, decorated with Valkyrian symbols that glowed faintly in the dim corridor light. He wore his dress uniform and carried a sidearm, though he doubted he would ever need it here. The princess had 4 other Valkyrian guards who watched from different positions. They did not trust him, a human to be the only protection. His chest still ached where the energy blast had hit him. The burns were healing, but the scars would be permanent. The doctor said he was recovering well, but without his neural implants, everything felt different. He had to rely on his natural senses alone, and sometimes he felt slow and disconnected from the world around him. The strange connection to Princess Yura had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. He could feel her presence through the door, a constant awareness at the back of his mind. Right now she felt calm but slightly sad. He had learned to recognize her emotional patterns over the past week. It was like having a new sense that he had not asked for. The door opened suddenly. One of the Valkyrian attendants, a stern-faced female named Mirai, stepped out. She looked at Daewon with barely hidden disgust. Valkyrians considered humans to be a lesser species, interesting perhaps, but ultimately inferior. Mirai spoke in her musical language, and Daewon's translator earpiece converted it to English. The princess wanted to speak with him. Daewon entered the quarters for the first time. The rooms were beautiful and strange. Crystals grew from the walls, providing soft light. The furniture looked like it had been grown rather than built, all smooth curves and organic shapes. Princess Yura stood by a large window that showed the stars outside. She wore simpler robes than before, though still elegant. When she turned to look at him, her black eyes seemed to see right through him. She spoke, and her translator device converted her words. She thanked him formally for his service and for saving her life. Her voice was cold and proper, exactly what he expected from alien royalty. But through their connection, he felt something different. She was nervous and curious. Day-One responded with equal formality, saying he was just doing his duty. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then she asked him a question that surprised him. Why had he done it? Why had he thrown himself in front of the weapon? He was just a guard. She was a stranger, an alien. Humans were supposed to prioritize their own kind. Day-One thought about it carefully before answering. He told her it was his job to protect people. Her species did not matter. She needed help, and he was there. It was that simple. Princess Yura stared at him for a long moment. Through their connection, he felt her confusion deepen. In Valkyrian culture, such selflessness did not exist. Everyone had their place in the hierarchy, and you protected those above you because it benefited you. The idea of sacrificing yourself for someone with no expectation of reward was foreign to her. She dismissed him without another word, but Day-One could tell he had given her something to think about. The days settled into a routine. Day-One stood guard during his shifts 12 hours at a time. He accompanied Princess Yura to diplomatic meetings and cultural events. He learned quickly that his job was not just about physical protection. The princess was isolated here. The other Valkyrians kept their distance following protocol. The human diplomats were too nervous or formal around her. She was alone in a crowd. One evening there was a formal dinner in the station's main hall. Representatives from Earth and several alien species attended. Princess Yura was seated at the head table, and Day-One stood against the wall behind her watching. The dinner was going well until the conversation turned to trade agreements. An Earth ambassador made a joke, something about Valkyrian crystal exports. It was meant to be friendly, but the princess did not understand human humor. She responded in a way that sounded insulting. The ambassador's face turned red. Other humans at the table shifted uncomfortably. Through their connection, Day-One felt Princess Yura's sudden panic. She had made a mistake and did not know how to fix it. Without thinking, Day-One stepped forward and whispered quickly to her. He explained that the ambassador had made a joke, and that she should respond with light humor as well. He even suggested what to say. Princess Yura followed his advice. She made a careful comment that made the humans laugh and the tension disappeared. The dinner continued smoothly. After it ended, she turned to Day-One with something that might have been gratitude in her black eyes. She did not thank him out loud, but he felt her relief through their bond. From that night on, something between them shifted. She began to rely on him not just as a guard, but as a guide to human behavior. Late one night, during his watch outside her quarters, the door opened. Princess Yura stepped out, wrapped in a dark robe. She looked surprised to see him still there. She asked if he always stood guard through the night. Day-One explained that different guards rotated shifts, but yes, someone always watched. She seemed troubled and told him she could not sleep. The station's artificial day and night cycle was different from her homeworld. Everything here felt wrong to her. She asked if he would walk with her to the observation deck. It was an unusual request, but Day-One agreed. They walked through the quiet corridors together, her in front and him a respectful distance behind. The observation deck was empty at this hour. The large transparent wall showed space in all its beauty. Stars stretched out forever, and in the distance a purple nebula glowed softly. Princess Yura stood at the window, and for the first time, her controlled facade cracked. She spoke about missing her home, about the pressure of being royalty, about how every word and action was watched and judged. She talked about her siblings who competed for their mother's approval, about never being able to just be herself. Day-One listened without interrupting. When she finished, she seemed embarrassed by her openness. He shared something in return. He told her about his grandmother who had survived the colony wars, watching her home destroyed. He told her about choosing to become a soldier because it gave him purpose and meaning. He explained that protecting others helped him feel like he was making up for all the destruction his species had caused in its past. Princess Yura listened carefully to every word. She asked him if humans ever felt trapped by duty. He told her yes all the time. But duty was what gave life structure and meaning. Without it, what were they? Just creatures drifting through space. She considered this and said that Valkyrians believed the same thing. But they had forgotten that duty should serve life, not replace it. It was a profound observation, and Daewon found himself respecting her intelligence. These late-night conversations became regular. Whenever Princess Yura could not sleep, she would find Daewon on watch and they would walk together. They talked about everything from philosophy to favorite foods. She was fascinated by human emotions and how openly humans expressed them. He was curious about Valkyrian telepathy and their crystalline biology. They learned from each other. One night she received a message from home. Her eldest brother had been officially named heir to the throne. She was now third in line with no real chance of ever ruling. When Daewon came on duty, he immediately felt her distress through their connection. It was stronger than anything he had felt before, a wave of grief and loss. He hesitated, then asked permission to enter her quarters. She was standing in the center of the room, her hands clenched at her sides. Small crystals had formed on her cheeks, the Valkyrian equivalent of tears. She looked at him and her control finally broke completely. She spoke about feeling worthless, about never being good enough, about being forgotten by her own family. Daewon did something he knew was forbidden. He stepped forward and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Physical contact between species was not allowed by Valkyrian law. It was considered inappropriate and potentially dangerous, but Princess Yura did not pull away. Instead, she stood very still, as if the simple touch was something precious. Through their connection, Daewon felt her emotions shift from grief to something warmer. Comfort, gratitude, something else he could not quite name. They stood like that for several minutes, not speaking. Finally, she stepped back and composed herself. She thanked him quietly and asked him to return to his post. But something fundamental had changed between them. Daewon could feel it. The line between guard and charge, between human and Valkyrian, had blurred. They had become something more than their roles allowed. They had become friends. As Daewon returned to his position outside her door, he felt uneasy. Colonel Park had warned him to maintain professional distance. The Valkyrian attendants watched him with suspicion. Everyone could see that Princess Yura treated him differently than other guards. He was playing a dangerous game, getting too close to someone so far above his station. But when he felt her presence through their bond, calmer now and more at peace, he could not bring himself to regret it. He stood watch through the night, unaware that their friendship would soon be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. Forces were already moving, back on the Valkyrian homeworld, that would change both their lives forever. 3 months had passed since Princess Yura arrived on Nexus 7. The station had settled into its routine, and so had Daewon. His life had become a strange balance of formal duty and informal friendship. During official events, he was the silent guard standing at attention. During quiet nights, he was the companion who walked with an alien princess and talked about stars and dreams. The other humans on the station had started to notice. Whispers followed Daewon through the corridors. Some people thought it was admirable that he had formed a connection with the princess. Others thought he was getting too close to something dangerous. The Valkyrian delegation was even more concerned. Ambassador Talon, the head of their group, watched Daewon with increasing suspicion. One afternoon, Princess Yura requested that Daewon accompany her to the station's arboretum. It was a large garden built inside the station, filled with plants from different worlds. She said she wanted to see Earth plants growing in space. Daewon walked beside her, no longer behind as protocol demanded. She had insisted on this change weeks ago, saying she preferred conversation to staring at his back. They walked through rows of flowering trees and strange alien plants that glowed in the dim light. Princess Yura asked him about Earth seasons, something her world did not have. He described spring when flowers bloomed and winter when snow covered everything. She listened with genuine fascination, asking questions about things he took for granted. How did humans stay warm? What did snow taste like? Could you really catch it on your tongue? Daewon found himself smiling as he answered. She made him see his own world through new eyes. In return, he asked about her home. She described cities made of crystal that sang in the wind, oceans that reflected light in ways that created images in the sky, and telepathic concerts where thousands of minds joined in harmony. Her world sounded like something from a dream. They sat on a bench beneath a tree that bore fruit resembling purple oranges. Princess Yura picked one and examined it carefully. She asked if it was safe to eat. Day-One checked the label and confirmed it was. She took a small bite and her black eyes widened. She had never tasted anything like it before. Velcarians ate crystallized nutrients that were efficient but flavorless. This fruit, with its sweet and sour taste, was completely new to her. Watching her experience something so simple with such wonder made Day-One realize how isolated her life had been. She was royalty, given the best of everything, but she had never really lived. She had never tasted fruit, never made a real friend, never chosen anything for herself. Everything had been decided for her since birth. The realization made him sad for her. Princess Yura noticed his change in mood through their connection. She asked what was wrong. Day-One hesitated, then spoke honestly. He told her that he thought her life, despite all its luxury and power, seemed lonely. She was quiet for a long moment, then admitted he was right. She had been lonely for as long as she could remember. Until now. Until she met him. The words hung in the air between them. Something had been acknowledged that could not be taken back. Day-One felt his heart beat faster. This was crossing a line they should not cross. Princess Yura looked at him, and in her alien features, he saw something unmistakably human. Hope, fear, connection. Before either of them could speak again, Ambassador Talon appeared at the entrance to the Arboretum. The ambassador approached quickly, his expression stern. He spoke in Velcarian, and Princess Yura's face became a cold mask once more. Day-One could feel her emotions through their bond. Though anger, frustration, resignation, the ambassador glanced at Day-One with barely concealed hostility before continuing his conversation with the princess. Finally, she responded in clipped tones and dismissed the ambassador. After Talon left, Princess Yura explained what had happened. Reports about her behavior had been sent to the Velcarian court. Her mother, the queen, was displeased. A royal princess should not be spending so much time with a human guard. It was beneath her station and reflected poorly on their entire species. The queen demanded that Yura maintain proper distance and remember her position. Day-One knew this would happen eventually. He suggested that perhaps they should follow the queen's wishes. It was the reasonable thing to do. Princess Yura looked at him sharply. Through their bond, he felt a flash of hurt. She asked if that was what he wanted. He admitted it was not what he wanted, but what was smart. They came from different worlds, different species. Whatever connection they had could not lead anywhere. Princess Yura stood up from the bench. She spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision. She told him that her entire life had been about being smart and following rules. She had never questioned anything, never wanted anything for herself. But knowing him had changed her. He made her want more than duty and protocol. He made her want to feel things, to experience life, to be more than just a title. She asked if that was so wrong. Day-One had no answer. He was a soldier, trained to follow orders and do his duty. But looking at her, seeing the hope in her eyes, he wanted to tell her no, it was not wrong at all. Before he could respond, his communicator buzzed. Colonel Park was summoning him to her office immediately. The timing felt ominous. In Colonel Park's office, Day-One stood at attention while his commanding officer studied him. She was a woman in her 50s, experienced and fair. She had always treated Day-One well. But now her expression was concerned. She told him plainly that his relationship with Princess Yura was causing problems. Both the human diplomatic corps and the Velcarian delegation had complained. Colonel Park asked him directly what was happening between him and the princess. Day-One tried to explain. They were friends, nothing more. The princess was isolated and needed someone to talk to. He was just doing his job. Colonel Park listened, then shook her head. She told him that whatever he thought this was, it needed to stop. He was a Marine. She was alien royalty. The gulf between them was too vast. She ordered him to maintain professional distance. No more walks in the Arboretum. No more late-night conversations. He would guard her during official duties only, and another Marine would take the night shifts. Day-One wanted to argue but knew he could not. He agreed to follow orders. As he left the office, he felt like something important was being ripped away from him. A week later, a cultural festival was held on Nexus 7. It was meant to celebrate the diplomatic exchange and show cooperation between species. Princess Yura was scheduled to perform a traditional Valkyrian demonstration. She would create art using her biocrystalline abilities, shaping light and energy into beautiful forms. It was rare for Valkyrians to perform this for aliens. It was considered sacred and intimate. Daewon stood in the audience during the performance. He had barely spoken to Princess Yura in the past week, following Colonel Park's orders. Through their bond, he could feel her awareness of him, but they maintained distance. The lights in the hall dimmed and she stepped onto the stage. Her crystals began to glow brighter and energy flowed from her hands. What she created was breathtaking. Shapes of pure light formed in the air, dancing and flowing like living things. They became flowers that bloomed and faded, stars that burned bright then died, waves that crashed and reformed. The audience watched in complete silence. Through their connection, Daewon felt her nervousness, her desire to do well, her fear of disappointing everyone. Without thinking, he sent a thought to her through their bond. "You are doing beautifully. Do not be afraid." He felt her surprise at receiving his encouragement, then a wave of warmth and gratitude. Her performance became even more confident. The light sculptures grew more complex and stunning. When she finished, the entire hall erupted in applause. Princess Yura stood on the stage accepting the praise with formal dignity. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She looked directly at Daewon in the crowd and nodded once, a clear acknowledgement. In Valkyrian culture, this was significant. A royal never acknowledged a subordinate publicly. It was the same as declaring that this person mattered to her. The Valkyrian delegation reacted immediately. Angry whispers spread through their group. Ambassador Talon's face darkened with fury. Even the human diplomats looked uncomfortable. Princess Yura had just made a public statement that could not be ignored. She had declared in front of everyone that Daewon was important to her. The scandal was instant. That night, Princess Yura requested Daewon's presence in her quarters. Despite orders, he went. He found her standing by her window looking out at the stars. She did not turn when he entered. She spoke quietly, asking if he felt it too. The pull between them, the connection that went beyond friendship. She had tried to ignore it, to follow protocol, but she could not anymore. She turned to face him and her expression was open and vulnerable. She told him that she cared for him deeply, more than she should, more than was allowed. She barely understood the human concept of love, but she thought this might be it.
The admission hung in the air like something fragile and precious. Daewon felt his own emotions surge.
He cared for her too, but he was also a soldier who understood reality. He told her gently that some things could not be. She was a princess with responsibilities. He was just a human guard. Their worlds were too different. Even if they wanted this, it was impossible. Princess Yura stepped closer to him. Her voice was fine. The message arrived at dawn, station time. Daewon was standing his watch when he felt Princess Yura's emotions through their bond suddenly spike with shock and grief. Something terrible had happened. Within minutes, the entire diplomatic wing was in chaos. Valkyrian guards rushed through corridors and urgent communications flowed back and forth. Daewon learned the news from Colonel Park an hour later. Princess Yura's eldest brother, the heir to the Valkyrian throne, had been assassinated. The same radical faction that had tried to kill Yura had succeeded with her brother. The second heir, her other sibling, was being declared unfit to rule due to past political failures and scandals. Princess Yura was now first in line to become the next ruler of the Valkyrian Empire. The implications were enormous. The Valkyrian Empire controlled dozens of star systems and influenced countless others. Yura had never expected to rule. She had been preparing for a life in the background, supporting whoever became the ruler. Now everything had changed. The queen, her mother, sent an immediate order. Princess Yura was to return home at once. The diplomatic exchange was over. She had 1 week to prepare. Daewon was not allowed to see her for 2 days. The Valkyrian delegation kept her isolated, preparing for the journey home. Through their bond, he felt her emotions swinging wildly between grief, fear, and determination. She was trying to be strong, but the weight of what was happening was crushing her. He wished he could help, but there was nothing he could do. On the third day, a message came for him. Princess Yura had requested a private meeting in the Arboretum. It was the middle of the night, station time. Daewon went immediately, not caring if it was against protocol. When he found her, she was sitting on their usual bench beneath the purple fruit tree. She looked exhausted, her crystals dim and her shoulders slumped. She explained everything to him. Her mother was forcing her to return for immediate training as crown princess. There would be years of preparation, political maneuvering, and constant danger. Her brother's assassination proved that many Valkyrians did not want any change. They would try to kill her too. She would be surrounded by enemies, both open and hidden. She was terrified. Daewon sat beside her and listened. He wanted to tell her everything would be fine, but he could not lie to her. She was walking into a dangerous situation, and they both knew it. After a long silence, she turned to him and asked something he did not expect. She asked him to come with her to Valkyris Prime, not as an official guard or diplomat, but as someone she trusted, someone who could help her stay grounded in what was real. Daewon was stunned. Humans were not welcome on the Valkyrian homeworld. The species had barely started diplomatic relations. For him to go there would be unprecedented and probably dangerous. He pointed out all the problems. She countered everyone. She needed him, not because he was a soldier or because protocol demanded it. She needed him because he was the only person who saw her as Yura, not as a princess or future queen. He looked into her black eyes and saw desperation and hope mixed together. He knew this was insane. Going to an alien world where he was not wanted could end his career or even his life. But looking at her, remembering everything they had shared, he found himself unable to refuse. He told her he would try. He could not promise anything, but he would try to find a way. The relief that flooded through their bond was overwhelming. Princess Yura actually smiled, something rare and beautiful. She told him that if he could come, she would make it work somehow. She would convince her mother, the diplomatic corps, anyone necessary. They just needed to be together. The word together hung between them, meaning more than either wanted to acknowledge out loud. The next morning, Daewon requested an emergency meeting with the Earth diplomatic team. He sat in a conference room with 5 confused officials who could not understand what he wanted. He explained carefully. Princess Yura, now the crown princess, had requested his presence on Valkyris Prime as part of her personal household. It would be a continuation of the cultural exchange, showing cooperation between species. The diplomats looked at him like he had lost his mind. One of them laughed outright. Another asked if he understood what he was suggesting. Valkyrians barely tolerated humans at diplomatic stations. Having a human on their homeworld, in the royal palace, was impossible. Besides, Daewon was a soldier, not a diplomat. He had no training for this. It would never be approved. Daewon persisted. He argued that Princess Yura had saved his life and he had saved hers. They had a unique relationship that could benefit Earth. Having a human close to the future Valkyrian queen could be valuable for diplomatic relations. The officials were unconvinced, but they agreed to present the request to higher authorities. Daewon left the meeting knowing the chances were slim. Colonel Park called him to her office that evening. She was furious. She asked him what he was thinking, requesting to go to Valkyris Prime. It was career suicide. Even if somehow it was approved, he would be isolated on an alien world with no support. If something went wrong, Earth could not help him. He would be on his own. Was he really willing to risk everything for an alien princess? Daewon met her eyes and answered honestly. Yes, he was willing. Colonel Park studied him for a long moment, then sighed. She told him he was either the bravest man she knew or the most foolish. Probably both. She said she would support his request officially, but she could not protect him from the consequences. Whatever happened next was on him. 3 days passed with no answer. Daewon continued his duties, feeling time slip away. Princess Yura was busy with preparations for departure. They barely saw each other, but their bond kept them connected. He felt her worry and hope, and he tried to send back confidence and reassurance he did not really feel. Finally, on the day before the Valkyrian ship was scheduled to leave, the answer came. Earth's diplomatic corps had negotiated with the Valkyrian delegation. Princess Yura had made her request formal and official. After intense discussion, a compromise was reached. Daewon would be allowed to accompany her as a cultural liaison for a probationary period of 3 months. If his presence caused problems, he would be sent back immediately. It was barely a victory, but it was enough. Daewon had 3 months to prove he belonged there. 3 months to help Princess Yura navigate her new role. 3 months before they decided if he could stay or had to leave forever. When he told her the news through their bond, her joy was so strong it almost made him dizzy. The next day, Daewon packed his few belongings. He said goodbye to his fellow Marines, who thought he was crazy. Colonel Park gave him one final piece of advice. She told him to watch his back, trust his instincts, and remember he was representing more than himself. He was representing humanity. Whatever he did would reflect on all of them. He promised to do his best. The Valkyrian transport ship was unlike anything Daewon had seen. It was massive, shaped like a crystal formation with surfaces that seemed to shift and change in the light. Inside, everything was beautiful and alien. The corridors curved in ways that made no sense to human eyes. The walls glowed with soft light, and strange music played constantly, barely audible. He was given a small cabin near the servants' quarters. The message was clear. He was not important, barely tolerated. The Valkyrian crew ignored him or stared with barely hidden hostility. He was the only human on a ship full of aliens who thought his presence was an insult to their species. It was going to be a long journey. Princess Yura was kept in private quarters with her attendants. Daewon saw her only once before the ship departed. She looked different already, more formal and distant. She wore elaborate robes and crystal jewelry that marked her new status. But when her eyes met his across the loading bay, he felt her relief and happiness through their bond. She was glad he came. The ship entered faster than light travel with a strange sensation that made Daewon's stomach turn. He stood at a viewing port watching Earth shrink behind them until it disappeared completely. He was leaving everything he knew. His home, his career, his life. All for an alien princess who was about to become a queen. Part of him wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. But through their bond, he felt Princess Yura's presence like a steady light in darkness. As long as that connection remained, he knew where he needed to be. The journey to Velkaris Prime would take 2 weeks. 2 weeks before he stepped onto an alien world where he was not wanted. 2 weeks before everything changed again. Daewon stood at the viewing port and watched the stars streak past, wondering what the future would bring. Whatever happened next, there was no going back now. He had made his choice. He would stand watch for the alien princess even if it meant leaving his entire world behind. And deep down he knew he would do it again without hesitation. Some things were worth any risk. Some people were worth any sacrifice. Princess Yura was one of them. Velkaris Prime appeared through the viewing port like something from a dream. The planet glowed with reflected light from its 3 moons, and as the ship descended, Daewon saw cities that looked like they were made of crystal and glass. Buildings rose in impossible spirals connected by bridges of pure light. Gardens floated in the air, held up by some technology he could not understand. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It was also terrifying. This was the heart of the Valkyrian Empire, a civilization thousands of years old. He was a human soldier from a species that had barely reached the stars. He did not belong here. Every instinct told him to leave while he still could. But he felt Princess Yura's presence through their bond, steady and strong, and it gave him courage. The ship landed at the Grand Palace, a structure so large it looked like a mountain. Crystalline towers reached into the sky, each one glowing with different colors. Daewon stood with the other arrivals as they disembarked. The Valkyrian nobles and attendants swept past him without a glance. He was assigned a servant to guide him to his quarters, a small Valkyrian female who looked at him with open disgust. His room was in the servants' wing, far from the main palace sections. It was small but comfortable, with a window that showed the crystal city beyond. The servant informed him that he was expected to follow all palace protocols. He would be summoned when needed. Until then, he was to stay in his designated areas. Humans were not permitted to wander the palace freely. The message was clear. He was here on sufferance, nothing more. 3 days passed before he saw Princess Yura. During that time, he explored the limited areas he was allowed to visit. The palace was overwhelming. Corridors stretched for miles. Rooms were filled with art and treasures he could not begin to understand. Valkyrians moved through it all with grace and purpose, ignoring him completely. He was invisible, a curiosity at best, an insult at worst. Through their bond, he felt Princess Yura's stress and exhaustion. She was being pulled in every direction, meeting with advisors, learning protocols, being shaped into a proper crown princess. She had no time for anything else. When they finally met, it was because he was summoned to the throne room. He had no idea why. The throne room was vast, with a ceiling so high he could barely see it. Crystal formations grew from the walls, creating patterns of light and shadow. At the far end, on a raised platform, sat Queen Nari. Princess Yura stood to her right, formal and distant. Daewon walked forward, very aware of every eye watching him. He stopped at the appropriate distance and stood at attention. Queen Nari was intimidating. She was tall and regal, with crystalline formations that covered half her face like a crown. Her eyes were completely black, showing no emotion. She studied Daewon for a long moment, then spoke. A translator device converted her words to English. She asked him directly why he was here. What did he hope to gain from this? Daewon answered honestly. He was here to support Princess Yura during her transition. Nothing more. The Queen's expression did not change, but he felt a wave of cold amusement from her. She told him that Princess Yura was no longer a princess who could indulge in personal attachments. She was the crown princess, future ruler of an empire. Personal feelings were irrelevant. Duty was everything. The Queen made him an offer, or perhaps it was a test. Princess Yura would undergo succession trials to prove her worthiness to rule. If Daewon could contribute meaningfully to her success in these trials, he would be allowed to stay. If not, he would be sent back to Earth and Princess Yura would be forbidden from contacting him again. He had 3 months to prove his worth. The probationary period Earth had negotiated would serve as his test. Daewon agreed without hesitation. Through their bond, he felt Princess Yura's mixture of hope and fear. The Queen dismissed them both. As they left the throne room, Princess Yura walked ahead of him, maintaining proper protocol. But through their connection, she sent him a single thought. Thank you for staying. He sent back his own thought. I will not let you fail. The next weeks were difficult. Daewon was excluded from most meetings and events. He did not understand Valkyrian social hierarchies or telepathic etiquette. When he did attend functions, he was ignored or treated with barely concealed contempt. Princess Yura was busy constantly, and they barely saw each other except at formal gatherings where they could not speak freely. He felt isolated and useless. He started to wonder if coming here had been a mistake. But then he met Lord Jiwan. The Valkyrian noble found him wandering the gardens one evening looking lost. Instead of ignoring him like everyone else, Lord Jiwan actually spoke to him. The Lord was older, with battle scars visible beneath his crystals. He had been a military commander before entering politics. Lord Jiwan was fascinated by human military tactics. He asked Daewon about his service, his training, his experience. They talked for hours, and Daewon finally felt like someone saw him as a person, not just a strange human. Lord Jiwan explained that most Valkyrians judged worth by birth and position, but he judged by competence and character. He could see that Daewon had both. Lord Jiwan began teaching him. He explained the complex politics of court, how to read body language and telepathic signals, the art of saying one thing while meaning another. He told Daewon that his biggest advantage was being unpredictable. Valkyrians followed patterns and traditions. Humans did not. That made them dangerous in the best way. If Daewon could learn to use that, he might actually help Princess Yura succeed. The first succession trial began a month after their arrival. Princess Yura had to resolve a trade dispute between two noble houses. Daewon watched from the back of the negotiation chamber. The two houses argued back and forth, presenting evidence and counter-evidence. Princess Yura listened carefully and tried to find a compromise. But something felt wrong to Daewon. The houses were too coordinated. Their arguments were too rehearsed. Lord Jiwan had taught him to watch for patterns, and this fit a pattern. The houses were working together against Princess Yura, trying to make her fail. It was a setup. During a recess, Daewon used their telepathic bond to share his observation. He pointed out the coordination, the rehearsed nature of their arguments. He suggested a bold move. When negotiations resumed, Princess Yura took control. She called out the deception publicly, presenting evidence of the house's coordination that Daewon had helped her see. She then proposed a solution that benefited both houses and the crown. The bold move shocked everyone. The noble houses were caught completely off guard. They had no choice but to accept her proposal or look like traitors. The trial ended in her favor. The court was impressed by her decisiveness and political awareness. Queen Nari watched from her throne, her face unreadable. But Daewon felt something through the throne room. Approval. The queen was pleased. After the trial, Lord Jiwan found Daewon and congratulated him. The human had just proven he could be useful. Word would spread. That night, Princess Yura sent for him. They met in a private garden within her quarters. She looked exhausted but happy. She thanked him for his help, for seeing what she had missed. He told her it was Lord G1 who taught him what to look for. She smiled and said that made it no less valuable. They talked for an hour, really talked for the first time since arriving. She told him how hard everything was. The constant lessons, the political games, the pressure to be perfect. Everyone watched her for any sign of weakness. She felt like she was drowning. But having him here, knowing he was nearby through their bond, kept her grounded. He reminded her that she was not just a title. She was still Yura. That was worth everything. Daewon admitted his own struggles, feeling useless, isolated, out of place, wondering if he had made a terrible mistake. But helping her today had reminded him why he came. She needed him, not as a guard or advisor, but as someone who believed in her, someone who saw her worth beyond her title. That was something no Valkyrian could provide. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the alien stars through the garden's transparent dome. Through their bond, emotions flowed back and forth without words. Understanding, affection, something deeper that neither wanted to name. The future was uncertain, filled with trials and dangers. But in this moment, they had each other. For now, that was enough. As Daewon returned to his quarters that night, he felt more hopeful than he had in weeks. He had proven he could help her. He had made a friend in Lord G1. He had a purpose. The next 2 months would bring more challenges, he knew. More tests, more attempts to make Princess Yura fail, but he would be ready. He would help her succeed no matter what it took. What he did not know was that enemies were already moving against them. Not everyone wanted Princess Yura to succeed, and some would do anything to remove the human who stood beside her. The real danger was just beginning. After the first trial, things changed for Daewon. Nobles who had ignored him before now approached with curiosity. Some wanted to understand how a human had seen through the deception. Others wanted to use him for their own political games. Princess Yura's success made her a stronger player at court, and anyone connected to her became valuable or dangerous, depending on perspective. Daewon became Princess Yura's unofficial strategist. When she faced complex political problems, she consulted him. His outsider perspective helped her see solutions that Valkyrians, trapped by tradition, could not imagine. They developed a pattern. She would attend meetings and negotiations while he observed from the background. Afterward, they would discuss what happened and he would offer insights she had missed. But not everyone was pleased. Duke Sangmin, a powerful noble from an ancient house, watched Daewon with growing hatred. The Duke was a traditionalist who believed Valkyrians should never have contacted humans at all. He saw Princess Yura's relationship with Daewon as proof that she was unfit to rule. A proper Valkyrian leader would never rely on a lesser species. Duke Sangmin began spreading rumors. He told other nobles that Princess Yura was compromised, controlled by human influence. He suggested she lacked the strength to rule independently. The whispers spread through court and Daewon felt the atmosphere shift. People looked at him with suspicion again. Anonymous threats appeared in his quarters. Written messages warning him to leave before something bad happened. Lord G1 warned him that Duke Sangmin was dangerous. The Duke had powerful allies and no patience for anything that challenged Valkyrian superiority. If Sangmin saw Daewon as a threat, he would not stop at threats. Accidents happened at court, Lord G1 explained. People fell from high places. Food became poisoned. Daewon needed to be very careful. The second succession trial arrived 2 months after the first. This one tested military strategy. Princess Yura would command a Valkyrian fleet in a simulated war game against an enemy force. Duke Sangmin himself would command the opposing fleet. It was rigged from the start. The Duke had months to prepare, and the simulation parameters favored traditional Valkyrian tactics. Princess Yura had only days to plan. Daewon studied the simulation rules with her. Valkyrian military doctrine emphasized overwhelming force and telepathic coordination. Their fleets moved like single organisms, beautiful and efficient. But there was a weakness. They expected enemies to fight the same way. They had patterns and protocols for every situation. That predictability could be exploited. He suggested something radical. Instead of meeting Duke Sangmin's fleet head-on, they should divide their forces. Use hit-and-run tactics, strike from unexpected angles, then retreat before the enemy could coordinate a response. It was guerrilla warfare, something humans had perfected over centuries. Valkyrians never fought this way. They considered it dishonorable and inefficient. Princess Yura was hesitant. If she used human tactics and lost, it would prove Duke Sangmin right. She would look weak and controlled by foreign influence. But if she used traditional Valkyrian tactics, the Duke had every advantage. She would almost certainly lose. After long consideration, she chose to trust Daewon. They spent the next days planning every detail of their strategy. The simulation took place in the palace war room, with the entire court watching. Princess Yura sat at her command station, surrounded by virtual displays showing her fleet. Duke Sangmin sat across from her, confident and composed. When the simulation began, the Duke's fleet advanced in perfect formation, exactly as Valkyrian doctrine demanded. Princess Yura's response shocked everyone. Her fleet scattered. Individual ships broke formation and retreated in different directions. To the watching nobles, it looked like chaos and cowardice. Duke Sangmin's fleet pursued, trying to bring her forces into a decisive battle. But Princess Yura's ships refused to engage. They hit hard and fast, then disappeared before the Duke could respond. Each strike was small, but together they disrupted his fleet's coordination. The Duke grew frustrated. His perfect formations meant nothing when there was no enemy fleet to fight. Princess Yura's forces were everywhere and nowhere, striking constantly but never committing to battle. The Duke's ships began making mistakes, breaking formation to chase individual targets. Their telepathic coordination, their greatest strength, became useless. After 2 hours of simulation, Princess Yura's forces had inflicted enough damage to declare victory. The Duke's fleet was still mostly intact, but completely demoralized and disorganized. In a real battle, they would be vulnerable to a final decisive strike. Princess Yura had won using tactics the Duke never expected and could not counter. The war room fell silent. Duke Sangmin's face showed naked fury. He stood and left without the traditional acknowledgement of defeat. The other nobles whispered among themselves, shocked and impressed. Some were horrified that a crown princess had used human tactics. Others recognized brilliant adaptation to overcome a superior opponent. Queen Nari, watching from her throne, showed the faintest hint of a smile. After the trial, Princess Yura received formal congratulations from many nobles. But Daewon noticed something concerning. Duke Sangmin's supporters were gathering, talking in angry clusters. The Duke himself had disappeared. Through court sources, Lord Jiwon learned that the Duke was furious, humiliated in front of everyone. He blamed Daewon entirely. The human had corrupted proper Valkyrian tactics and made the Duke look like a fool. That night, Daewon was summoned to a private audience with Queen Nari. He went alone, uncertain what to expect. The Queen received him in a small chamber without attendants. For the first time, she spoke to him in perfect English without a translator. She told him she had been watching him carefully since he arrived. She wanted to see if he was truly loyal or just using her daughter for personal gain. The Queen admitted something surprising. She had allowed him to come to Valkyries Prime not because of diplomatic protocol, but as a test. She wanted to see if Princess Yura could inspire genuine loyalty from someone with nothing to gain. She wanted to see if her daughter could use that loyalty wisely. Daewon had proven both things. He was genuinely devoted to Princess Yura, and she had learned to leverage his unique perspective effectively. But the Queen was also practical. She told Daewon that his presence was a complication. Princess Yura's feelings for him were obvious to anyone with telepathic senses. Such emotional attachments were dangerous for a future ruler. They created vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit. If Daewon stayed, it could not be as an equal. He would always be subordinate, always human, always lesser in the eyes of Valkyrian society. Before Daewon could respond, the Queen made an unexpected offer. She had been negotiating with Earth's government in secret. She proposed creating a formal position for him, Ambassador of Human Affairs to the Valkyrian court. It would be a permanent posting, giving him official status and protection. But accepting meant he could never return to his old life. He would be bound to Valkyries Prime, to the palace, to Princess Yura forever. The Queen gave him 3 days to decide. She told him to think carefully about what he was giving up. His home, his people, his identity as a human soldier, everything that made him who he was. The choice was his, but it was permanent. Once made, there would be no going back. Daewon left the audience chamber with his mind spinning. He had come here for 3 months. Now he was being offered forever. He spent the next 2 days in turmoil. He consulted with Lord Jiwon, who told him honestly that court life would be difficult and isolating. He would always be an outsider. He communicated with Colonel Park on Earth through encrypted channels. She warned him that accepting would make him an asset of the Valkyrian Empire. Earth would see him differently. He would lose his connection to humanity. Princess Yura herself told him she would not force him to stay. She understood what she was asking, but she admitted with complete honesty that she needed him, not just as a strategist, but as someone who kept her grounded, someone who reminded her that beneath the crown and expectations she was still Yura. Without him, she feared becoming like her mother, cold and calculating and alone. He was her anchor to something real. Daewon walked through the palace gardens late at night trying to make his decision. He thought about his life on Earth, the Marines, the simple certainty of following orders. He thought about his grandmother who survived the colony wars. He thought about duty and purpose and what it meant to protect others. And he thought about Princess Yura, who had somehow become the most important person in his life. Before he could give his answer to the Queen, everything changed. Duke Sangmin, unable to defeat Princess Yura politically, decided to try a different approach. If the crown princess died, the succession would fall to someone more suitable. Someone who understood proper Valkyrian values, someone who would remove human influence from their empire. The Duke began planning an assassination, and this time he would make sure it succeeded. The ceremony was scheduled for midday. Princess Yura would be formally acknowledged as crown princess before the entire court. It was a grand event with thousands of nobles and officials attending. The ceremony hall was the largest room in the palace, with crystal pillars that reached toward a ceiling, painted with images of Valkyrian history. Daewon stood in his designated position among the crowd, watching. He still had not given Queen Nari his answer about staying permanently. The 3 days were almost up and he remained uncertain. Part of him wanted to stay with everything he had. Another part knew that staying meant giving up everything he was. He pushed the decision aside for now and focused on the ceremony. Something felt wrong, though he could not explain what. Princess Yura entered the hall in full ceremonial robes glowing with crystalline jewelry. She walked with perfect grace toward the platform where Queen Nari waited. The crowd fell silent, thousands of eyes watching. Through their bond, Daewon felt her nervousness but also determination. This was the moment her life changed forever. After today, she would officially be the heir to an empire. Queen Nari began the formal words of acknowledgement. Princess Yura knelt before her mother, head bowed. The moment stretched on, solemn and beautiful. Then Daewon heard it, a sound that did not belong, a faint mechanical hum beneath the ceremony music. His combat instincts, trained through years of service, screamed at him. He looked around frantically, searching for the source. The explosion happened so fast. Fire and force erupted from multiple points around the hall. The ceremonial pillars had been rigged with explosives hidden in their bases. Chaos exploded with the blasts. People screamed and ran in all directions. Daewon was thrown backward by the concussion, his ears ringing. He scrambled to his feet, searching through the smoke and panic for Princess Yura. He saw her on the platform, surrounded by her guards. Queen Nari was being pulled away by her personal security, but Princess Yura stood frozen, shocked by the attack. Then Daewon saw figures moving through the smoke, assassins in dark clothing. They were heading toward the princess with weapons drawn. This was not random chaos. This was a coordinated assassination attempt. Daewon did not think. He ran toward the platform, pushing through panicked crowds. An assassin reached Princess Yura and raised an energy weapon. Daewon threw himself between them, just like he had done months ago on Nexus 7. The blast hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Pain exploded through his body, but he stayed on his feet. He grabbed the assassin and fought hand to hand, no weapons, just training and desperation. More assassins came. Daewon fought with everything he had. He was outnumbered and outmatched. These were trained killers with telepathic coordination, but he refused to go down. Every second he bought was a second for help to arrive. He took hits, felt bones crack, tasted blood, but he kept fighting, kept standing between the assassins and Princess Yura. Lord Jiwan and loyal guards finally arrived. They fought alongside Daewon, pushing the assassins back. The battle was brutal and chaotic. When it ended, bodies lay scattered across the platform. Daewon stood swaying, bleeding from multiple wounds. His shoulder where the energy blast hit was badly burned. He had broken ribs and cuts everywhere. But he was alive. And Princess Yura was safe. He collapsed then, his body finally giving out. The last thing he saw was Princess Yura's face above him, her black eyes wide with fear and something else. Then darkness took him. He woke in a medical chamber 3 days later. His body ached everywhere, but the worst injuries had been healed by Valkyrian medical technology. Princess Yura sat beside his bed, and when she saw him wake, relief flooded through their bond so strongly it was overwhelming. She told him what happened after he fell. The assassination plot had been traced back to Duke Sangmin. The Duke had been arrested immediately and executed the same day. Treason against the Crown Princess was unforgivable. His supporters had been purged from court. The attack had actually strengthened Princess Yura's position. Her composure during the crisis, her immediate orders to protect others had impressed everyone who witnessed it. More importantly, Daewon's actions had been witnessed by thousands. A human throwing himself into danger to protect the Crown Princess, fighting against impossible odds, refusing to fall until help arrived. Even the most prejudiced Valkyrians had to acknowledge his courage and loyalty. The whispers about human influence corrupting the princess had stopped. They saw now that his loyalty was absolute and his value undeniable. Queen Nari had made a public decree. Daewon would be granted a title unprecedented in Valkyrian history, guardian consort to the Crown Princess. He would stand beside Princess Yura not as a servant or subordinate, but as her official protector and advisor. It was not equal to royal status, but it was far more than any non-Valkyrian had ever achieved. The title came with protection, authority, and permanent residency. Princess Yura asked him the question he had been avoiding. Would he accept the position? Would he stay? Daewon looked at her, really looked at her. She was exhausted and had obviously not left his side the entire time he was unconscious. Through their bond, he felt her fear that he would refuse, that he would choose to go back to Earth and his old life. He felt how much she needed him, not just as protection, but as the person who kept her human in spirit if not in species. He thought about his life before this. The endless patrols with no real purpose, the feeling of being just another soldier following orders. Then he thought about these past months, the challenges, the danger, the feeling of actually making a difference. He thought about Princess Yura and how she had changed his entire understanding of what was possible. Some connections transcended species, culture, everything that should have kept them apart. Daewon told her yes, he would stay. But he had one condition. She had to promise that no matter what happened, no matter how heavy the crown became, she would always remember she was Yura first and Crown Princess second. She had to promise not to lose herself in duty and protocol. She had to stay connected to the person she truly was. Princess Yura smiled, a genuine expression of joy that lit up her alien features. She promised. 1 year passed. Princess Yura was formally crowned queen after her mother chose to abdicate. Queen Nari decided that her daughter was ready and that she herself had served long enough. The coronation was magnificent, attended by representatives from dozens of worlds. Daewon stood on a platform reserved for the queen's most trusted advisors, wearing formal robes that marked his unique status. A human standing in a position of honor at a Valkyrian coronation. It was unthinkable, yet there he was. Under Queen Yura's rule, things began to change. She implemented reforms that shocked the conservative nobility. Positions would be granted based on competence as well as birth. Diplomatic relations with other species would expand. The military would adopt new tactics that combined traditional Valkyrian strengths with adaptable human strategies. Not everyone was happy, but no one could deny the changes brought positive results. Daewon became something unique in the Empire. He was a bridge between Valkyrians and humans, helping both species understand each other better. He advised the Queen on matters where a fresh perspective was valuable. He trained Valkyrian military officers in unconventional tactics. He became proof that cooperation between species could create something better than either alone. He and Queen Yura never married. Valkyrian custom did not recognize such unions with non-Valkyrians, and it would have caused political problems neither wanted. But their bond was deeper than any legal contract. Through their telepathic connection, they shared thoughts and emotions in ways that went beyond words. They understood each other completely. In every way that mattered, they were partners. Sometimes late at night, they would meet in the private gardens within the palace. Away from watching eyes and political necessities, they could just be Daewon and Yura. They would talk about everything and nothing, sharing thoughts and comfortable silences. She would tell him about the weight of ruling an empire. He would share observations about the court that made her laugh. These moments kept them both sane. One evening, they stood on a balcony overlooking the Crystal City. The 3 moons were all visible, casting beautiful light across the buildings below. Queen Yura's hand rested near Daewon's on the railing, not touching because that would be noticed, but close enough that the intention was clear. Through their bond, she asked him a question. Did he ever regret choosing to stay? Daewon answered honestly, never, not for a single moment. Though he did admit he sometimes missed Earth's coffee. Queen Yura laughed, a sound that still surprised people when they heard it. She told him she would have some imported immediately. It would be a royal decree. Only she could make importing coffee sound so official and important. He smiled, feeling contentment he had never known before. The title guardian consort to the queen had an interesting effect. Everyone knew the queen could not be separated from her guardian. Where she went, he went. Political enemies could not remove him without removing themselves first. The queen, who could command fleets and order executions, had chosen to bind herself to a human. Not because protocol demanded it, but because she wanted it.